Hello, and thanks for clicking into another edition of Sit Down with Ed Brown. You know, we've been fortunate enough to talk to a lot of really good quality researchers. Today, we get the opportunity to speak with somebody who's been doing this for a long time, who's had a lot of success. And I'm just going to bring him in now. Please welcome Mr. Mark Parra. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
Great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Listen, thanks for coming on the show. And I know that we were supposed to do this a while back, and as I told you earlier on the phone, I kind of dropped the ball with that, so I wanted to give you a public apology.
No big deal.
But we're glad you're here now. We're glad we got it put together. And I'd like to start these off by asking, how did you get involved with the Bigfoot subject in the first place?
Facebook. I had done earlier in my late 30s. I had been doing some paranormal. I had always been interested in UFO stuff. I listened to Coast AM a lot because I used to work graveyard shifts, and so I'd known about it, but I was more interested in the whole UFO and paranormal thing that was going on. And just through meeting friends through Facebook, I got involved with the, I started seeing how many people were involved with the Bigfoot community. And so I got, really involved in that, just started meeting a lot of people, making a lot of friends on Facebook that were in the Bigfoot community in that genre. And so it, it kind of pulled me towards that. And I got more interested in that more so than the whole UFO thing and the typical subject you hear on Coast to Coast AM.
Sure, and I'm the same way. I mean, I like any kind of mystery is cool to me. Whether it be paranormal, UFOs, Bigfoot, it doesn't matter to me. I like them all. So I'm definitely with you, and I understand that for sure. How long have you been? Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just from that, it kind of snowballed. This is about 5 years back. You were getting ready to ask that.
Yeah.
It was about 5 years back. And so, you know what, I said, because I live here in Colorado and I live in the Rocky Mountains, I said, well, I'm gonna first start looking, because I want to see one of these things. If they do exist, and why wouldn't they be in the Rocky Mountains of all places? So, I just did the homework here at the local level, and just started, researching sighting reports in Colorado, and through the VFRO site and other sites and so forth. And, lo and behold, I found out that I live in an area that's been a hot zone since probably the early 80s. Maybe before that. So, I just I know all the trailheads. I'm an outdoors kind of guy. So, I spent a lot of time at the different campgrounds and trailheads and places like that around here on the Front Range. And I just got my maps out, and, I just kind of figured out where I wanted to go to look and see, based on the sighting reports. And, I got the cork board out and everything, and just kind of decided where I wanted to go. And I chose one particular state park that's near my area because it's close, and I know the area because I had been going there and hiking since I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't sure, if they were going to be there. The reason that I chose that particular state park is because there's such a high amount of caves. I mean, like millions of little and deep, big caves. And I said, the sighting reports, by everything that I'm taking here, is showing me that if they're going to hide and they're going to have habitat, water, lots of deer, lots of wildlife, this is where they're going to be. So, I had been watching on YouTube and so forth. Back in the day, about 5-6 years back, I started watching YouTube and seeing how the different researchers that were out there were operating. I had seen Timber Giant, Bigfoot, and Mitchell Waite, and a few of the others that were in the field doing field research. And I really liked Timber Giant Bigfoot. I liked his style of just kind of walking and filming with the camera, and he seemed like a really personable guy. So I said, you know what, I can do that. So that's basically how I got started. I said I'm going to go into the state park, and I started hiking the trails, and then I started going off trail. And it was just a matter of days. I mean, literally days of me going off trail and just trudging through the forest. And I started finding sign like crazy. I mean, structures, prints, everything that I had studied up on through being involved in the Bigfoot community and hearing other, researchers, what they described as what is, Bigfoot sign. I started finding stuff all over the place. And, I was a little skeptical at first. I have to say some of this could be human-made. Is it really Bigfoot? I'm not sure. So I just kind of, let things happen on their own. Then it was about, I'd say 2 to 3 weeks in of me starting this, and I was just recording all this stuff, taking pictures and so forth of the structures I would find, tree breaks, things like that, your basic Bigfoot sign. And then I went down a ravine one day because I was inspecting this tree break, and something caught my eye off to my right. And at that time, I was using a little Nikon L180, a little black camera. I got at Walmart for like $120.
Sure.
But I had it around my neck, and something caught my eye, something black, about 25 yards away. And I looked up, and lo and behold, this massive Sasquatch squatting. I don't know if it was using the bathroom or if it was just sitting, why it was just sitting there, but it was in this ravine. And we kind of stared at each other. My eyes kind of had to, focus on what exactly I was looking at. And it looked like a giant gorilla. And, I tell people to this day, it looked like a humongous gorilla. The arms and the shoulder strength on this was like, and the upper body was just tremendous. I mean, and I kind of froze because I don't know if it was my subconscious or what it was, but I was kind of intimidated by the actual size of this thing. And it had a little tiny head, kind of resembled a bonobo chimp. And I know that's going to irk some people, but it did. But it had these really huge eyes and this ridiculously large hands and feet. And I couldn't believe my eyes kind of like looked at the hands because, I'm kind of like afraid. So I'm thinking, God, those hands, they could just tear me to pieces if they wanted. But it just looked at me. And so I lifted up my camera, I guess, just on instinct, and I just started snapping off shots. And then when I realized, I guess, what I was doing, it kind of backed around behind a boulder and disappeared, and it was gone. I don't know where it went. Of course, I didn't take off after it because this was my very first experience. And so I was like, holy smokes, these things really do exist. So, that was my first experience in this park. And then, once I had made up my mind that this actually happened and I wasn't hallucinating,
Correct.
which, I still, even after seeing it, I was still kind of skeptical about some things as the weeks went by. So, again, I went into county records. I used to be a sheriff's deputy here in Colorado.
Cool.
So I am a private investigator. So I pretty much knew how to get into county records and look for things. And So I had come across a report from 1989 where there was a massive dog kill in the area around Castle Rock, Colorado, which is where I'm located. Coyotes and people's ranch dogs, because I live in a community that's rural. It's very south of the Denver metro area, and it's mostly ranches and some farms and mansions that are rural properties and so forth. But back in 1989, people had their dogs stolen, ranch dogs, and something was killing all the coyotes in the county and leaving them on the trailheads. I mean, they would like tear the heads off and leave them right in the center of the trail. So whoever's walking, be it a family or whoever, so walking these trailheads through the state park, we're going to see the coyote heads sitting right there on the trail. And so that was the first big report that I found online. And back then there wasn't really any Bigfoot investigators in Colorado. So the county had an organization called Oregon Bigfoot Research Group that came out and did a report on it. And that was the first big report that I had found in that state park. And they took the report, and in fact, it's still online. That group, I don't know if they're still around or not, but they still have the report posted on Google when you look for it. So I was able to find that. And, I just, like I said, I just did I wanted to get one on film because that's what everybody was into, on Facebook and so forth. Everybody's trying to get them on camera or on film or whatever. So I was really kind of gung-ho back then. I was going every weekend. And I was finding their tracks and other signs and so forth, animal kill and scat and things like that. And so I had been trying to track these tracks, because I had worked in search and rescue when I was a sheriff's deputy, and that, I have a lot of mountaineering experience. So, I was determined that I was going to track one of these things down, or, that one main Bigfoot I saw. And I was never able to. It was just a process of me following the tracks, and then they would disappear. But what I had figured out is that they make a giant circle around the state park. It's like, I don't know if they do it nightly or weekly, but it's a series of canyons, kind of like Mesa Verde, but they're heavily forested here in Colorado, so there's a lot of cliffs and caves, and this set of canyons is a state park that's inside of Castle Rock. There's several state parks that we have in Douglas County, and but this particular one has caves everywhere. Every couple of feet, because they have these gigantic boulders that the geologists say are go back 180 million years ago. Wow. They estimate that the park was formed. So, so unlike a lot of canyons like the Grand Canyon or so forth, where you have desert and, people have that view of what they're like in New Mexico or in southern Colorado, this particular canyon has an old growth forest that grows down into the canyons. So it's really thick pine forest, spruce, aspens, and so forth. And it's a wildlife sanctuary. So, there's no hunting in there. It's basically a family state park where they have trailheads. And there's deer and bobcat and skunks and beaver and just about every kind of fauna that you can imagine in there. Not so much bears. The Division of Wildlife tries to, if someone reports a bear sighting, they usually will capture it, tag it, and then take it up to the high country. We don't get too many bears in that park. They kind of really are strict on that with the bears because they don't want hikers getting attacked. But I have run across some mountain lions up there. So anyway, basically this just became, I said, you know what I'm going to do, you know, over the 5 years, I kind of slowed down. I wasn't as gung-ho. I went through the whole process of gifting, leaving apples and corn and meat and and other things like that to try and get a reaction from them. And they always took the gifts. There was a while back there, about 2 years ago, a lady friend of mine had given me some really nice Arkansas crystals that she lives in Arkansas. So she sent me a whole box full of them. And I wanted to make sure, you know, that it wasn't animals that were taking my gifts and so forth. So I would throw in these crystals, and you know, lo and behold, they would take them. They took them. They take everything that I've left. They've taken the Tupperware bowls with the meat, and I never do find this stuff. So, you know, they're taking it somewhere.
Right.
So anyways, there's one particular cave that I had been going to, and there's a hole that goes down into the earth, into the canyon, because the canyons on top of them are like a huge mesa. And so I had always kind of, you know, intuitively thought they might be using these caves and going back into the earth or down into the earth, and that's how they're staying hidden. I don't believe that hair or no hair that they sleep outside during the cold winters that we get.
Right.
So this one particular cave, the reason it drew my interest is because outside of it, you know, I had found a huge teepee structure, stars and X's and so forth. And so I started gifting there. And when I would come back, you know, I would see how things had changed. I would find, you know, prints, not really great prints a lot of times, because the soil is all covered with pine needles, dead pine needles, and so forth. I wouldn't get these, you know, these perfectly defined prints where you have all the toes showing. Sometimes I would have like one toe, but they were always huge, you know, 16 inches or more by 6. And so anyways, I just started filming around me, kind of like Timber Giant used to. And I have one particular video that I recorded where I was leaving that area one day, and I had turned around, and I was just showing the area, kind of panning around slowly, telling where I had just come from. And this juvenile Bigfoot had followed me up, and I guess it didn't realize I had the camera pointed in its direction. And it kind of peeked out from behind a tree, and then it just popped out. And I didn't see it. This is one of those things where I would go home and then slow down my video, really slow to see if anything was moving around me where I wasn't looking, because I would often, you know, just pan around me without focusing on something. And this thing, it was pretty good size, in black, gray skin tones, and it popped right out, followed me up the hill. And it's pretty good defined on the video. You know, I consider it my best video, and this was early on. So I went back, and I'd done several follow-up videos to show, you know, the size. This thing squatting down behind this tree is as tall as me, and I'm 5'9", 165 pounds, but I went and stood at the exact spot, and me standing is where its head was while it was squatting down behind this tree. So, I mean, this thing was big. It wasn't a bear. Yeah, so that's my favorite video. So, needless to... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you mentioned that it was a juvenile, but that size... What was it that led you to believe that it was a juvenile, not an adult?
You know, I've always just said that intuitively. I just assumed that it was. It wasn't the one that I saw in the ravine. It wasn't that big. In fact, it was more lanky, It looked like it was very disheveled, kind of dirty. You know, it didn't resemble the other one I had seen whatsoever. So I was thinking, and you know, it kind of had a distorted face. For a while there, I was thinking that it was wearing an animal skin, like a mask, because the face kind of looked like and it was snouted, and it looked deformed. So, you know, it's just a process of me going home, sitting there thinking on all that, meditating on all that, thinking, you know, maybe there's some deformity going on with maybe this could be one of the children of that bigger Bigfoot. Maybe they're inbreeding. Who knows why that is? There could be a million reasons for it. So, you know, I just continued on, kept doing what I was doing. I was 100% sure I had Bigfoot there. They were utilizing that park. So over the 5 years up until today, you know, to this time now, I'm continuing, just trying to continue to establish some form of communication with them, because by this time they know me.
Right.
They poop at me because I'm the guy with the food. You know,
Sure.
I've spent hundreds of dollars, you know, on corn and apples and things like that over the years, and so that was my intent, was to break down those walls that they had built around themselves, you know, that hopefully they would eventually come out and respond to me. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. There's sometimes where I go and there's nothing. I get no action. I mean, it's just birds and, you know, the wind blowing through the trees. I mean, there's nothing. And then other times I'll go back and I'll get foot stomps and what I assume are foot stomps, but I tell people usually what I hear, it sounds like a big rock or a club just hits the ground, thud, and shatters shatters the silence of the forest. And so that's something that I'm running across lately, is that's how they let me know when they're in my vicinity, is I'll hear this boom. It's kind of like a thud on the ground.
Now,
and
you're interpreting that as a foot stomp, but I think that's a primate characteristic, is, you know, basically almost slapping the ground with their hands, you know? I mean, do you think that would be a primate, I don't know, letting you know that they know you're there? I mean, is that kind of how you're perceiving that?
Yeah, or they're communicating with each other, but I have to say this, that they do speak English. They don't like talk to me, you know, in sentences. They'll occasionally spit out something. There's been mornings where I'll be walking down the trail to get to where I need to get to, and over across the other side of the river, I hear a female just yell out, "Hiya!" And then I'll stop and look around, and, you know, nothing else. There's no hikers around. There's no one around.
Right.
They've shouted before to me. You know, "Hiya" is a particular phrase that I've heard several times. So, you know, it's that thud, though, is always the thing that makes the hair on your neck stand up, because it's hard to tell where it's coming from, for one, but you can hear it, and then you kind of like freak out. You get the creeps because you're like, they're watching me from somewhere, and you're looking around, you don't see anything. And you know, I've heard them growl. I've heard them bark. They kind of do a growl, whoop, bark type thing. It almost sounds like a big dog, or like I've compared it to what a silverback gorilla sounds like when they roar. I've heard them roar, and that really freaks me out, because and they usually do. Yeah, they usually like See, they're usually asleep in the day when I'm there because it's so hot or whatever the reason is, because they own the night. And I kind of have to entice them out. I call a lot and so forth. Hopefully, hoping that I can get some action on the videotape, or on the video recorder. And more times than not, I don't. But occasionally I get vocalizations and so forth. It's kind of slowed down. They are there, but they're not as aggressive as they were back when I first started this. When I first got onto them, I think they knew that, and they were actually pretty aggressive about with whooping and wood knocking and doing all that kinds of stuff. And now it's kind of slowed down. I really have to call them out, doing a lot of calls and so forth to let them know I'm there and so forth. So, over 5 years, I wouldn't exactly say it's habituation, as people define that. They take my food gifts, they leave me prints, they leave me animal bones, they've left me a skull of a little bear that they killed. They do things like that. Like in some of my gifting areas, I get bones back for the food that I leave. A lot of animal bones. And but I don't have, even after all this time and all the money I've spent, I still don't have the interaction that I want, and I may never get it. You take what you can get, I guess, from them. And that's the reason I'm continuing on. Is because I keep hoping that it'll get better.
Sure. So they're giving you just enough to keep you interested, but not enough to say, okay, I got it.
Well, see, that's the thing, is this last couple months that I started this new season in 2015, the big one, or whichever one has these 16-inch prints, and it may be the same one that's been following me for 5 years. He's been leaving me these prints where he'll leave one or two, or it looks like he stomped the ground really, really hard. And then, but there isn't a track line. There isn't a track line where I can, I can't even tell if he's skipping into rocks or what he's doing. And so what I'm thinking is he's doing it for me. There was an instance where I was down by the river and I found a print, and I'm measuring it. I have my tape measure out, and I'm taking pictures of it with my phone and so forth from different angles. And I hear this voice, up above me, up in the canyon, say, "Why are you doing that?" And, I kind of look around. I just kind of talk out loud and tell him, I'm just trying to see why how our feet are different, which I don't think they believed. They know exactly what I was doing, because they're saying, this guy, why is he measuring my footprint there? So they're watching me all the time. And I didn't want to scare them off, because they have such a beautiful home here. They don't have to worry about hunters or anything, because it's a state park, and there's no poaching. And the cool thing about this park is that it's only open from sun up to sundown. So come the nighttime, the rangers come in to close the gates, and they make everybody leave. If your car's left in the lot, they'll probably tow it. So no one ever goes in there at night, because they don't allow camping or fires, because it's an old growth forest and it's a protected park. So, they run the night, so they kind of, that's why I know they're there, is because they don't have to deal with the humans at night. I think they figured it out, that they sleep in the day. Hikers will do their thing on the hiking trails, and then they're gone. So it's a really neat place that I found, and I just keep discovering new things all the time. This group that I have been working with always throws me a curveball, You know, I guess one of the biggest things for me was one of the areas I used to gift, where they built these dens, and I've showed these in some of my videos. I assume that these are birthing dens. They're like, what they'll do is they'll take a cave, a small cave, where you could crawl into, and they'll cover it up and try and disguise it with sticks and branches and so forth, and basically, you know, make a den out of it. But it's so camouflaged that, you know, I was surprised that I ran across these, you know, hiking through the canyons. You see something off in the distance, you're like, what is that? And you go over there, and then it's like this huge den, and inside they're really clean and so forth. And so I'm thinking to myself, you know, this isn't a hunter or just some survivalists that are doing this because, you know, like Boy Scouts or whatever. Because always when I would find a den or anything, and I've discussed this on my videos over the years, is I start canvassing the area. I'll make a circle 25 yards around, and I always start finding X's and stars and other type symbology that they've made kind of that surrounds the den. And so I've always, you know, said, well, these are birthing dens is what these are, because I've gone back and some of them fall apart and get dilapidated. They haven't been used again. Sure. So there was another a lady. She works for SIR, Robin Roberts. Mm-hmm. And I had I met her through some of the SIR people, Sasquatch Investigations of the Rockies. Sure. I had actually met, and she was like, oh, yeah, I've been going in there for a couple of years now. They're in there. I've seen them. And I was like, you're kidding me. So we started talking. And she's like, oh, yeah, I leave them food gifts and so forth. And so I was like, that's awesome. You know, she told me all her stories and so forth. So we did a couple trips out there, expeditions out there together. And, you know, so she's like, kind of like, you know, like we're not like really close friends or anything, but she does her thing with SAR. I do my thing. But the cool thing about it, though, is that my story, she just doesn't stand alone. I'm just not out there trying to prove this. I actually have another organization that knew about them before I even discovered them, which was just, that was like the coolest thing. I was like, yes, it's you know, I'm not being deceived here.
Right. And it's funny because Robin is I've known Robin for a little bit, and we were actually going to have her on the show, but I guess at the time her work schedule was pretty hectic, and getting everything lined up was tough. And we're going to have her on the show, but she has some great stories, and she's been pretty active. So that's pretty good. And it's nice for you to get that information of what you're seeing through another group. I think that's awesome.
Well, yeah, I was like, she had told me, you know, oh, yeah, I've known about them for a while. And I was like, you're serious, right? And I was like, oh, my God, how cool. You know, I was like thrilled that somebody else had experienced them out there, because that meant that they, you know, it confirms everything. Because even though I was having all these, I had a sighting and so forth, there were always these questions in the back of my mind. Are they just coming through there to hunt, or are they actually living there constantly? Because like I have hundreds and hundreds of hours spent out there where I get nothing, where there's no action, and it's just a good day of hiking is what it is.
Sure.
And then I have these, I have about 18 good experiences over 5 years of, you know, it's really turned up for me this past couple of weeks or months, I should say. I'm getting like whoops that I never heard before, vocalizations, and I'm trying to get them on video, of course, but the problem is, you know, it's like they happen, and then you go to turn on your video camera, and then it goes quiet, and you don't get anything. So it's like, it's a timing issue trying to get them. but it's pretty cool. This is a hobby. I don't make any money off of doing this. It's everything has been out of pocket, and but I enjoy doing it, and whatever kind of information I can share out there, hopefully other researchers, can pick up something or see something that I've shown that they found, and that helps, other people to.
Sure. And I think that's one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on the show, was because I know you have a reputation of sharing what you're finding, and that I think that, me personally, I believe that if all the researchers would kind of get together and kind of go over their field notes and discuss what they're seeing and what, personally, I think it would help us find this thing faster,
Well, they don't. Here's the thing. There's a lot of people who were mad at me on the local level here, other organizations and so forth, because they thought I was giving away too much information. They were worried that some pro-kill types may come around and so forth. But, I did my homework on this. I had contacted sheriff deputies in my county, and they were all open to it. Oh, yeah, we've seen them run across the road, blah, blah, blah. As long as they're not hurting anything, we don't care. I was like, you're serious, right? I've hooked up with some other people. I've taken them out there and so forth. I have a buddy, Justin Smith, who's a wildlife photographer out here in Colorado, and he goes out and he goes into other places in the Rockies. He goes to state parks, national parks, everywhere. He's out every day. He's just all over the place. And so if he finds something, he'll send me an email and say, what I found, a structure or whatever. And I'm like, well, where were you at? And so I was working with him for a while, and he had been in another state park on the other side of the county, closer to the mountains, in an area called Plum Creek. And that was a hotbed of sightings going back to 1954. But he started finding prints and structures and so forth. He's like, you got to come out here with me. So we had done some expeditions out there, and also had, and this is about 40 miles away from the park that I normally work, but we had captured some great stuff in that area also. So what I believe is happening is that there's about 3 or 4 clans that work between Bailey, Colorado, Castle Rock, Colorado Springs, and, along the Front Range, along the Platte River. Because people do send me emails. I get people send me emails and say, hey, I'm a hunter or I'm a fisher, and I was working in the Platte River, and somebody was throwing these huge rocks at us, and they were landing in the river, and we thought it were kids and so forth. And all the places that they are known sighting areas too. So
sure.
They're all along the Front Range of the Rockies. So this is really pretty cool. How this has grown and changed over the years for me.
Sure. Now, I wanted to ask, and you don't have to give me any kind of detailed location or like that, but how far off the beaten path are you going? You're going pretty far off, I assume.
Most times it's a quarter mile to a mile to find structures or sign. But a lot of times what I've shown on my Facebook page is that, see, if I'm driving down a dirt road, because there's a dirt road that runs through the park, right? And they have designated parking areas. But I've driven down the dirt road, and there's been tree breaks right at the road. So, I'll park my car, I'll go to where that tree break is, and then just start climbing up the mountain. And that's when I start running into things.
That's cool.
Yeah, and so they cross the roads, because basically in a canyon, the way a canyons work, and there's about 6 canyons that kind of spider web. But the way it works is you have the water, of course, or a river that runs down the center. and you have a left side and a right side. And so they're constantly going back and forth, back and forth. And that's why I've never been able to narrow down exactly where they are at a given time.
Sure.
Because I'll find prints on the left side of the canyon one day, and then I'll say, okay, well, next week I'm going to go on the other side, directly across, and I'm finding the same stuff over on the other side. So, they're constantly on the move. What it appears like is they, of course, are following the game trail, the deer.
Right.
They're usually, and I tell people this, if you have Bigfoot in your area, if you find the game trail where the deer are, and, the deer really tear it up, you can always tell the game trails. But if you find the game trails first and then you kind of make a big circle, your chances are very good that about 20 yards, anywhere from 10 to 20 yards left or right of that game trail, you're going to start finding prints if they're in that area.
Sure.
So they're I think they live with them. I don't think they just move through an area and eat everything and burn it out to kind of conserve their food supply.
Sure. I think that makes perfect sense.
They probably sleep with them too. It gets so cold here in the Rockies,
Right.
I've seen how the deer and the elk and the antelope, the pronghorns, they all group up together on those cold winter nights, and they'll sleep in a big circle to generate body heat. So I could just see the Bigfoot doing the same in there with them.
That would make sense as well, actually. But I think all that stuff is cool, and I think that's great. But I'm going to back up for just a second because you mentioned something earlier that I had to take note of because I wanted to bring it up again. But you had mentioned the coyotes that were, the heads ripped off and things of that nature. And I'm going to find this really interesting because I'm hearing a lot of that exact same detail. So I'm hoping maybe if you can elaborate a little more. I mean, like, where are they finding these things? Are they finding them on the ground or in the trees, or where are they finding them?
Okay. The state park sits in a little county, in the little county I live in. And surrounding it is very rural area. You have farms, you have horse ranches and so forth. It's not a city. So, you have a lot of properties where you'll have a ranch, and then a mile away it'll be another ranch, kind of like that. And in the center is the state park. And within the state park, there's trailheads that, that the state has designed that, your typical state park, please stay on trails,
Sure.
because of erosion and so forth.
Right.
I've kind of broken that rule already, but, that's
we won't
point.
We'll put the point.
Yeah. They know all about me already. That's unfortunate, but no one has come after me yet, so I think we're okay. So anyways, along the trailheads, people would find a coyote head just sitting right there on the trailhead as they're coming down the trail. So they would report, and then another and another. So when I found this report from Oregon Bigfoot Researchers Group, they're online, the entire county, they were finding them everywhere. The sheriff actually back then investigated it because something had gone through several different parts of the county, not just in that state park, and was killing dogs, ranch dogs, but just finding coyotes dead everywhere with the heads ripped off. And he didn't know at that time, or the sheriff didn't, if they weren't poachers because there were no bullet wounds. And, with someone going around the county with a samurai sword, coyotes they don't just come running up to you. They're not domesticated dogs. So you would actually have to go after, and they'll run, and they have to go after them, chase them down to kill one. So they were really perplexed. I'm not exactly sure who called the Oregon Bigfoot Researchers organization or group, but they did the investigation. I'm thinking someone in the county had to have called them because, again, at that time there was no Bigfoot research groups in Colorado. Probably the BFRO is who I'm assuming had something to do with that, because they're here. They have a guy here that's with the BFRO that's down in Bailey, Colorado, and they've been here. The funny Bigfoot people have been here, but they don't like to contact any of the researchers here. They're that's the thing about the BFRO. They have their contact in each state, and that's kind of where they go. So we learned real quick they don't want nothing to do with us. That's okay.
They're their very own entity for sure. They do a great job. Don't get me wrong. I'm not downing them, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so, that's cool. They have their area. I have my area. SIR has their own areas. And we all respect each other, trying not to go in and capitalize on other people's finds and so forth.
Right.
The best that we can, we had a big Bigfoot expedition like 2 years ago up in the Pikes Peak area. And I put out a couple videos on that. We had several groups, SIR and me, and were on that expedition. I had some pretty good finds up there on Peak. It's just really, really rough terrain, very cold, and it's a little far for me to go. The cool thing about where I work now is I'm 30 minutes away, so I can leave my gifts and go back in the morning to check and see if they're there or not. And so it makes it really convenient, living where I do in Colorado.
Sure.
But, that's...
go ahead. That's really cool stuff. I mean, and kind of confirm on those coyote kills that you were referring to. And I will say the people who I talk to, just for their own privacy, but I can tell you they're pretty well known in the community as well. And they're telling me stories very, very similar to what you're telling me, so when I hear something over and over, my ears kind of peak up a little bit. My interest even gets more, peaked. So I find that pretty cool. And that's interesting.
Well, yeah. Here's the thing: is that I looked at what is the most common animals. Why are they here in the first place? Yes, there's deer, but like I said, it can't just burn out all the deer, because that wouldn't take them very long. There's probably enough deer in there to support maybe a family of Bigfoots. I don't think they're like everywhere. I think what I have is maybe 4 individuals, and it's probably a family unit. And so what we do have, though, is we've got a coyote problem out here in Colorado. I mean, the coyotes, they take people's poodles off the porch, their cats. You're allowed to shoot coyotes out here because they've attacked people, children, and it's because they propagate like rabbits. And so that's the biggest 2 things that we have in this part of Colorado. We have rabbits everywhere and coyote. And we have a lot of hybrid coyotes. People's dogs and so forth that have run away, that actually run with the coyote packs. Yeah, I was surprised. I've seen coyotes look like German shepherds. And so I think, group, what their mainstay of their diet has been is coyote. Other than, they do eat turkey vulture. I have a lot of turkey vultures. In my last video that I just did out, where I found these prints, it looks like he climbed up a tree and raided a turkey vulture. And right at the base of the tree where I find these 2 prints, which is one of my gifting areas, by the way. But this is the first time that I've actually found the eggs. He took the eggs, and there was a piece of a bone, which I know is from a turkey vulture. So he or she raided that nest, ate all the egg, killed the turkey vulture right there, and then left 2 prints So I was like, yeah, that's what I said. They just climb right up the tree and raid the nest.
Right. Well, I mean, I've always felt that they were, my opinion, I've always felt that they were an ambush predator, meaning that they will just, and I don't think they just sit and hide and wait for something to come by. I think they see something and they subconsciously, they determine what direction this thing is going, whether it be a coyote, whether it be a deer or whatever, and then they work their way into their path, and then they wait for it to come by and they just grab it. That's what I've always felt. It may be crazy. I'm sure I'll get some hate mail for that, but that's all right.
No, none of us really know. I mean, none of us. All we have is speculation. My particular case is that I'm not working in a national forest with this group, so their area of terrain is limited, and the amount of fauna that they had to feed on is limited. So, because if they were to burn out all the animals there, and it's a wildlife preserve, like I said, there's everything from skunks to bobcat to you name it. But if they were to burn out the deer and so forth, they would have to leave. And then which would mean that they're not going to have the hide capability moving back up into the mountains, That's one of these, that's the thing about this is with the way the Rocky Mountains are structured is millions of years ago, they had where the water ran off, the Rockies, and it created these canyons and these, they're like gigantic ditches, and they run all off the Rockies out to eastern Colorado. And, some of them have rivers and so forth, but it all is runoff from the Rockies that was created millions of years ago. And so this group, we believe, is that moved the farthest east of because once you get out beyond where I'm at, it gets pretty barren in eastern Colorado. It's prairie land. There's a lot of elk and so forth, but hide capability and water goes away.
Sure.
So this is kind of like the last stop before they would go east and eventually end up in Oklahoma or Nebraska, So, and there isn't a whole lot in Nebraska either, but, they would end up in Oklahoma. But as far as, anywhere east of where I'm at in Castle Rock, there's not no reports of Bigfoot whatsoever. So
sure. All right. Go ahead.
That's just another one of the things when I got here in my basement, I've got all my topo mats set up. So, and I have pegs where the sighting reports are. I know where every river is, every body of water is. I know all of that. So I've pretty much got them narrowed down. Now, the thing of it is that what I know they're doing is they've gone underground. They have publicly dug into the mesa through caves and so forth. And the problem that I'll always have is no one will ever be able to track them down because, like I said, I have found huge holes in the ground where like huge rocks have been moved, like 300-400 pound rocks, and I don't know where they went. So I'm like, well, where's the rock? Here's the hole. You can see this gigantic rock has been moved. And so I think what they're doing is they have entrances into the canyon, and they block the holes, and there's no way of knowing, where they're at. They're underground somewhere.
Well, that's interesting. It's the first time I've heard anything about someone noticing rocks missing, which I think is fascinating. And I mean, you're right. If there was a 300 or 400 pound rock there, you would know that it was there. I mean, it'd be kind of hard to hide that. So that's
well, if you're going to do like what I'm doing is I always focus on the forensics, and that's what I've shown in most of my videos. So I spend a lot of time looking at the ground instead of looking around me to see if a Bigfoot's peeking. I'm looking for disturbances in the soil, anything on the ground. A lot of times you'll find animal kill. It's over in the bushes. And most people would never notice if they're not actively looking for the evidence. So my whole thing is I'm always I mean, I'm not staring at the ground. I'm always looking around me.
Sure.
But
Sure.
you know, the one way I can determine, if I come to an area, I'll see the disturbance in the soil. And then I can start saying, okay, what is this? Was this elk, this deer? What did this? A bear?
Right.
And so that always has led me to sign, is focusing on that, the disturbance in the soil. For me, anyways, living in Colorado, and because I'm in a pine forest, we don't have the moisture. Somewhere like, let's say, like Washington State, you have the rainforest, and it's the Pacific Northwest. So you always see people that get these beautiful, beautiful prints because the soil is muddy and it's wet,
Softer,
it's moist.
right.
So yeah, and so I have pine needles all over the place, dead on the ground. But that's like I'm showing my videos. I'll see the disturbance where someone's been walking because they messed up the pine needles, and then I can say, wow, look at that. That's a pretty big print right there.
Sure.
And then I start looking around, and there, then you have an X or a TP or something. And so that's kind of how my evidence has gone. Animal kills, scat. I will say, though, that the point that I haven't been able to secure over these years is hair. Every time I'm out, I'm really looking for hair, but that is so hard to find.
Right. Right.
Even in the dens and so forth. I've gone through them, with a toothpick looking for hair and just can't find the hair. So that's one of those things. That's part of the forensic evidence I haven't really capitalized on right now, but I'll get there eventually. Not that it's important.
I have no doubt. Well, obviously, simple hair could help identify the animal, or at least classify the animal. Okay, something left this hair, it's unknown, so let's give it a classification. So that makes sense.
Well, yeah, there was one time I did find porcupine needles all over the ground, and I found some brown hair. It looked like coyote. It looked like a coyote got into a fight with a porcupine, and he really took it out on that coyote. There was hair, and there was those porcupine needles just all over, and so I have found hair, but I don't believe it's Bigfoot, because when I've seen, they are black, and that's the point I wanted to get out. They do look like Patty. They're black, and they look like gorillas. The only difference is that they have more, Patty was kind of groomed. She didn't have long hair on top of the head.
Right.
These ones tend to have a bushy hair, a lot more hair on top of the head, and a beard. The big male that I call Brutus, that I've seen a number of times out there, he's got a beard, and that it hangs down kind of like a ZZ Top beard, and it's got gray in it, and he's really trippy looking. But his skin his skin is completely black. The skin on his face is black, and he's jet black, ink black, which is probably one of the reasons we don't see him.
Sure.
My problem is the sun working in the canyon. It's either above you or to the left or to the right. And when it creates all kinds of shadows, and it blinds the heck out of you. So a lot of times they could have been right next to me and I would have never seen them.
Sure.
One of those things I'm having to work with.
Well, I think that would have a lot to do with the territory as well. The region, being in the Rockies, where there's a lot of snow and things of that nature. It would make sense that they have more hair, just to help them stay warm. So that's
they're dirty.
Yeah.
They're I call them my dirty hairy Indians. No offense to my Native American friends, but
sure.
they are. They're disheveled looking is how I should say. The thing about the Patterson, Gimlin, Patty, Bigfoot, is she looks well groomed. Very groomed.
Right.
That's why a lot of people thought it was a suit for so long. And, what I've seen is, the hair is like sticking off the shoulder, or there's patches of hair missing, and you can see the gray skin tones. And they look like, they live in a hole. They look like a dirty gorilla that lives inside of a cave in the hole. And I've seen things, on my videos or on my still shots, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, what is that on its shoulder? And a lot of times it looks like hair has been pulled off. Maybe they got ticks or whatever, and so they'll be just missing, and you'll see skin. So I think that the thing about that is like for survivalists, people that have studied bushcraft, survival, and so forth, is that humans, we're not supposed to utilize caves, because at night all snakes and scorpions and spiders go in. We're actually supposed to build a shelter and then elevate ourselves off the ground to avoid snakes and so forth. And my area does have a lot of rattlesnakes. But that's what's confusing, is because all the caves that I have inspected, they're all clean. I mean, they're clean. There's no scorpions, there's no snakes in them that people would assume you would find. I have not run across a rattlesnake all season long. I don't know what that's about. Maybe they're eating them.
Right.
Or they just kill them. I don't know. Right.
Well, Mark, I'm going to change gears here just a little bit because I want to make sure we get this part in as well. And trust me, everything you said so far has been fascinating stuff. But you're about to try something new based on our conversation we had earlier, where you're going to bring in a psychic, basically. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, I already have. I like talking politics on Facebook too, unlike everyone else. So I have other friends and groups that I'm in that don't have anything to do with Bigfoot and so forth. And so one of them is Robert Young Pelton. He wrote the book, The World's Most Dangerous Places. He's a photojournalist, a war reporter, and he's been all over the world. And so his group is pretty popular. His page is pretty popular with people that like to talk international politics and so forth. And anyways, there's one of the women on his page. She was a photojournalist also. She had actually been in Tibet. She lived in Tibet and living with the security detail for the Dalai Lama. Yes,
I just find that fascinating.
She has an interesting story. She actually had people try and kill her. Chinese authorities, as you know, they want to kill him. So she had some harrowing moments, and she has her own blog showing all the pictures she took living with them, with the Tibetan people. And anyways, so she got interested, and she just, looked at my profile, probably from the comments I was making on his page.
Sure.
And she contacted me and said, hey, you know what, the Yeti's cool, I lived in Tibet, and it's a sacred spiritual thing to them. The Yeti is a spiritual creature to the people in Tibet, more so than a living entity, a biological entity. So she was like, yeah, this is like some fascinating stuff. So she just kind of been following me, and she contacted me and told me her story. She's got a master's degree in mental health psychology. She's a mental health counselor. She just got her master's, and she's been working with veterans that have PTSD and so forth.
Sure.
So, that's what she does as a living. But then she started revealing to me, she has these abilities. She's a psychic. And I was like, She was like telling me how, she'd been viewing my profile and so forth. And she said, your Bigfoot guy, the one you got on your cover page, the one you call Brutus, just showed up. It's showing up the second I was looking at you. And I'm, are you serious? I didn't know how to believe that at first because I'm a little bit of a skeptic there. I'm like, are you really? She's like, yeah, he's just talking away, talking about all kinds of stuff. He's pointing at you. He's pointing at certain areas and so forth. And so I said, okay, this all sounds too good to brew. So I said, well, she said, you want me to, we'll do a reading. He's really pushing at me. So I said, okay, let's do it. Let's, if he's talking to you or however he does it, let's, tell him I said this or tell him I said that. And she was talking about a particular video where I had an experience where the lightning started hitting around me. A storm moved in, and I had to take shelter in a cave until the storm blew over because there was like lightning hitting all around me.
Sure.
I didn't want to get struck. And he was talking to her about that lightning, and he kept telling her he knows what I'm talking about. And he was explaining that he was worried or concerned that one of the group had been injured. And he kept pointing at the lightning and then alluding that there was someone that was injured. And we were like, oh dear, I hope one of them didn't get hit by lightning. But he kept, talking about that. And I was like, okay, I'm not exactly sure I believe everything that she's saying because I'm just, I'm keeping an open mind, but I'm being skeptical too. So then she started talking about, she says, he's talking about a blonde woman. And I said, is he talking about Robin Roberts? Because she doesn't really have blonde hair. And then he said, she said, he's showing me a shovel. He's showing me a shovel. And he's really interested. He really likes that shovel. And then she's dipped. And I was like, bam, there's no way this lady could have known that. She was describing one of the duties that the rangers have inside the state park is they do trail restoration. So they're always working out on the trails, that's basically in any park that you have volunteers that do it or rangers. Well, she's like the lead ranger. She's the head ranger. And he started pointing. She said, I see this billet finger, and he's pointing at the blonde lady. And she said he wants to steal that shovel, but he hasn't done so yet because she leaves it lying around. He hasn't done it out of respect. I was like, holy smokes. And so I was like, okay, let's stop right there. You have convinced me of your abilities because no one could have known that the rangers do trail restoration, and that lady that he is describing is one of the head rangers.
Right.
And so I was like, holy smokes. So anyway, we were talking on the phone, and she'd stop and say, oh, he's interjecting again. He's showing me this wood pile, and he wants you to bring corn, and how he felt about me, and how the group felt about me. And then, some of it got depressed, and she was telling me he's a worrier. And she says, this one's a worrier. He's worried about encroachment. He keeps saying I'm old. I don't have much time left, or I don't have many moons left, and I'm worried about my children. And, so I was like, tell him, everything's going to be okay. You're safe there. The rangers make sure that no one's carrying guns or anything in there. And, he was just talking about how he's lonely, and he's depressed, and that he doesn't have, he was surprised that I reached out to him because he doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have a human friend.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, well, if he's telling you all this, then let's set something up. So she says, okay, he wants you to bring corn, and he wants you to bring it in a big piece of cloth or burlap, or cloth is what he was pointing at, so that he can carry it like a sack.
Right.
So I says, okay, I can do that. So that video I did, I had went out and I bought a nice big old piece of white cloth, and I bought 14 pieces of corn. And I put the corn, this Walmart corn, in the stalk and so forth, in this sack, tied it up, and I left it in the cave. In one of the earlier videos, the videos that I've done this past couple of months, I show that on the video. Okay, this is why I'm leaving this here. We're going to see what happens. Well, I didn't leave it where he wanted me to leave it. they did take the corn, but she said she described when I was going to show up, and they don't understand time. Or she said he doesn't understand, time like we do. So I told him you'd be there in 7 sleeps, 7 days, and so I set it up for the 7th day I would be there. Well, I didn't go to where he wanted me to go because he was pointing at a particular wood pile that he wanted me at, which was on the other side of the river. But because of the rains and the lightning and, it'd been the rainy season, the river was running so high I couldn't get across. I had to wait. So that's why I left it in that cave. Well, so I was kind of like bummed out. I was like, he's going to be, I didn't meet him when I was supposed to, and blah, blah, blah. I fell apart because of the weather. So I waited till my last couple videos, the last 2 I did. So I went back out there, and I went down to the river, and I was going to cross and go over there. And that's when I found the aspens and so forth broke. And I heard the females. I was sitting on a rock right after I filmed those aspens that had been snapped and piled up. And they started going, whoop, whoop, or whooping at me. I was like, is that Robin? Who is doing that? It sounded human. But then it started moving up the hill. And I could still hear them way up in the distance, and it sounded like 2 females. Woo! I was like, holy smokes. So I just started snapping off pictures, and then I'd look at them later when I got home. And lo and behold, one of the still shots I have, he was about, 50, 60 yards away from me. He stuck his big black head out through the bush and was looking at me. And it's the one I call Big Brutus. So he was watching me, but for whatever reason, They wanted me to follow them up there, and I couldn't get across the river. I was just like, it's too high. I usually cross at this log, but with the rains and so forth, it was up waist deep, and I wasn't going to get across there that day. So I just recently went back, and I found the footprints. He left me the footprints. And Sandra was like really just beside herself. She was so excited because, she wanted to be a part.
Right.
So, to confirm for her. So I said, you know what? And this isn't an ongoing thing. She's busy and so forth. So I haven't talked to her in a while. She's got other things going on. But we're going to do another one, and we're going to try and set something up again. And it was in the daytime, and we did it by phone. Now, the thing of it is, how it works with a psychic is they can tap into an individual's subconscious, but that individual usually has to be like asleep or in a meditative state, like in an altered state of consciousness. So because it's an exchange of visions, of visual pictures.
Sure.
So, because we did it in the day, he had to have been asleep or half asleep, kind of like that meditative state when you're just waking up. And in order for it to work, it's not like, she was contacting you or me. What am I hearing, a voice in our head? No, that's not actually how it works. You actually, in order for a psychic to tap into your subconscious, into you as an individual, you would have to be in that mental state, most of the times asleep. So that's why she believes he was asleep, and he kept calling her unusual woman, which we thought was hilarious. I've never been called that before. So anyways, so I'm sitting on this rock on this last set of videos, and this is really cool. And they were whooping at me. I'm just sitting there on the other side of the river, and I said, I'm talking out loud, and I said, yes, I said, unusual woman. She's my friend. She's a medicine woman. And I had her contact you because I don't know how to contact you. And I hear this male voice up there in the tree say, you're unusual. And he said it sarcastically like that. And I was like, holy smokes. He
that's
he
cool.
uses sarcasm. But he didn't come down, and that's the thing. And so, most of my experiences with them are vocalizations like that. They don't like to show themselves to me. I wish someday, that he would come, and even if he was just to stand across the river and let me get one good standing shot, I'd be happy.
Sure.
But they just want. There's a reason they don't do it. I don't know what that reason is.
Well, if I were to guess, it would be because of some people knew that they were real and where they were. Some people would be out hunting them, and it's unfortunate, but that's the unfortunate truth, I think.
Yeah, and the last video I did when I found this print over by the gifting spot, I heard what sounded like gunshots as I was there, and I recorded that on video, and I'm like, you know what? That doesn't sound like wood knocks. That sounds like a gunshot. So I contacted the rangers just to see if anybody had been. I have a pretty good relationship with them because they see me so much. And so I asked the girls, I said, anybody reported gunshots? And she had told me, no, there was some kids with firecrackers because they sell fireworks in our county. They're legal here, lady fingers. So it was a hiker, and some idiot lit off firecrackers. Good thing it was the rainy season.
Right.
Yeah, but I was really concerned about it. I was like, oh no, there's some, see, the thing about Colorado is you're allowed to carry a concealed because of the mountain lions and other things on the trails. We're a pretty gun-friendly state that way. But if you pull your gun out in a state park and you start target shooting, they'll bust you because you're not allowed to shoot in a state park, unlike a national forest, because there's families picnicking or hikers, and so they don't want you shooting, and plus the wildlife there is protected. So I was like, some idiot is shooting his handgun over here on the trail, and I'm going to have to say something because that park has been flawless as far as incidents.
Right.
With reckless juveniles and so forth. And I didn't want anything. I mainly didn't want the Bigfoots to think that it had anything to do with me, that I was lying, trying to set them up.
Sure.
So I told Sandra, you need to contact them. And she was saying, oh, no, the female really likes you. And she's a lot smaller than him. He's huge. And she is the boss, though, and he's just staring at her. He's staring at her to see what she wants to do. And she was saying, oh, she really likes you, she trusts you, and so forth. And it's just these conversations I've had since I've started working with Sandra. It's just been like, it's kind of like 50-50. Do I believe this? Do I don't believe this? Because it all sounds too good to be true. So the only way really we're going to be able to prove it is just moving forward. My research, I'm not relying on this. It's not like my goal is still to do what I've always done is when I'm in the field is to show people the prints or the structures that I find, the evidence, rather than focusing on blob squatch pictures or, I'm trying different things. And so that's how I keep a healthy balance. I know a lot of people have said, you let too many people cut stills from your videos and they see Bigfoots in every shadow and behind every rock and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you know what? If I do that, I've given some of them permission to do that. That's okay. Because in the end, as long as they don't put my name or my copyright on them, because in the end, if anybody has any questions, they just watch my videos, and they see that I'm trying to be straight up, and I'm not doing anything to try and say that Bigfoot is everywhere. I'm basically showing how I do evidence collection, and showing the different things I find out there. So because I don't want to get put in that box, people saying I'm a hoaxer or whatever.
Sure.
You know, which I'm adamantly against. You know, when I first started this thing, I said I was seeing how people were being put in that box for evidence they were finding. I'm like, oh, great, you know. If it does happen, I hope I get a good video, because they're going to be calling off the second it does.
It's a hard box too once you're in it. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, you don't want to get yourself in that box. So I've aligned myself with a lot of people over the years that I highly respect. That I proved to them that I'm not, you know, I would never hoax and so forth. And I've made it a point to, you know, align myself with those type people.
Sure.
You know, like I respect like J.C. Johnson down the Crypto Four Corners group, and different groups like that. I have a lot of American friends that I highly respect that have helped me kind of through this process over the years of learning. They've taught me a lot about, you know, the historical oral traditions of their tribes in the area and so forth. And so I've learned a lot in 5 years. I've got a long way to go, but, you know, things are progressing nicely, and I just hope that they continue to do so.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mark, I think you're doing some great work out there. I think most people think you are doing some great work out there. Obviously, unfortunately, as you well know, there are people out there who will criticize everything that's ever brought in, no matter how good or bad it is. And it's just part of the business, if you will, of Bigfoot.
Well, yeah, Bigfoot is click-based. It is click-based, and it's unfortunate. I think that's real. Like I said, you know, you have the people, the big researchers up in the Pacific Northwest. They all know each other. They've had beers with each other. You know, they've actually met each other at conferences and so forth. So they have a lot more in common, and so they can't understand either the terrain or the type of things that are going on with what we're experiencing in the Southwest. So that's why, like people like me and you know, Mitchell Waite before he passed away, J.C. Johnson, and the groups in this Southwest, in this part of the country, is who I've established my main relationships with, because they've had the same experiences, and they know the area, they know the terrain, they understand there is a difference in the type of Bigfoots that we get here versus Canada, Pacific Northwest, or Ohio. So, you know, you have all these different groups in different parts of the country, and so that's why nobody really can agree on anything, because like my terrain is an example, the Rockies, you know, it gets 30, 40 below in the middle of winter here. So, yeah, they would have to be underground, hair or not.
Sure.
And then you have a place like Washington State where you have rainforests and you got, you know, the weather's different. Or in Canada, like Ontario or where I've never been to Canada. But those individuals that research in Canada, they don't have the same type of terrain, the same type of fauna, plant life. So everything's going to be different. And so that's why it's so hard to get people, you know, to agree on things, because it is a regional thing.
That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Well, Mark, I'll tell you what, man, it's been an honor to have you on the show, and you've been through a lot of good things. I love the idea of bringing in a psychic and just seeing what happens and checking that aspect out. I think that's great. At this point in the show, we generally end it by giving our guests an opportunity to have the floor. Basically, if there's anything that maybe you wanted to touch on, how to get a hold of you, or where to look for your videos, or anything else, something that maybe we just forgot. This is your opportunity, so the floor is yours.
Okay, well, I'm going to continue working on through the summer. I do have to work, but I try and get out there weekly if possible. So I do have some night work coming up. All my videos, for those who don't know, can be found at Morrigans10 at youtube.com, which is capital MRRIGANS 10, which is the number 10, at YouTube. And then, of course, you can find me on Facebook. I'm not a real big blog writer. I don't have a blog or a separate website for my organization, Colorado Sasquatch Research. I just basically do everything through YouTube and Facebook. So if you friend up with me on Facebook, you can take a look at all the pictures I have and the still pictures I have of the Bigfoots I've caught up over the year. I've cut from my videos. And like I said, going forward, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully the activity stays good and it doesn't go away. I know for a lot of researchers, they have some really good experiences, and then it just dies off. Either they've scared their group off, or their group has moved on, or whatever, and it just stops. And I hope that doesn't happen to me. So one last thing, I guess, is if you have any questions, contact me and what I know. But that's about it, right? That's where we're at for 2015.
Well, it sounds like you got everything in working order. Sounds like you've done your homework. You've had some great experiences, and for your sake, I hope it doesn't dry up as well. But it sounds like you've got a pretty good location where you are. So kudos to you, and I'm sure that things will stay.
There you go.
So, Mark, thanks for joining us today, and I want to let everybody know that if you want to get a hold of Mark, very approachable guy, easy to talk to, as you heard on the show. Look him up, friend him on Facebook, ask him questions, and Mark, I'm sure, will be happy to answer the questions for you. And with that, we are out.